Russia and Saudi Arabia are really having a tough time coming to some kind of a deal. Remember, yesterday, OPEC did something very unusual. They sort of pre-announced a proposal/deal to cut 1.5 million barrels a day additional from their current output cut. The problem is, Carl, is that Russia had not signed off on that deal. That is a big problem. Russia is not happy, specifically one Vladimir Putin as well. Russia has a much higher cost. And so Russia needs higher prices. The problem is Russia wants both things. They want higher prices, but they also want to be able to keep their output steady. In other words, you want higher prices, you make the cut, we're going to keep doing what we're doing.
Saudi Arabia realized that it could fix this problem by itself, and so it's protecting its market share and positioning itself for the long term.
Break the price and crowd out competitors. So this is what Saudi Arabia is doing today. I think Russia will not sustain this for much longer, and I think Russia will come back to OPEC Plus, just like it did previously a few years ago.
Russians have been increasing their sovereign wealth fund reserves and foreign exchange reserves and gold reserves for the past several years to over $500 billion. The Saudis are at about the $500 billion mark as well, but the Saudi fiscal break-even is much higher. It's near $90 a barrel, while Russian fiscal break-even is in the 40s or low 50s. So the Russians, theoretically, and they've said it publicly as well, are likely to ride out the storm, be able to ride out the storm much longer than this.
The Saudi currency is pegged to the U.S. dollar. As prices go up in U.S. currency, their revenue goes up. As prices go down, the revenue goes down. The ruble actually floats, and it appreciates with oil prices. It depreciates with oil prices. That correlation gives it a kind of a boost when the ruble is low and prices are low. The cost of production is lower, and the
US shale sector is weak at the moment. I think Russia smells blood in that sector. So the last time the prices crashed back in 2016, we wiped out around 800,000 barrels a day of shale production, but that bounced back very quickly. So I think what Russia and now KSA are hoping is that we get a deeper cut. 800 won't be enough. They're probably looking at one.
A disaster for many shale producers in particular, and we're watching it very closely. Saudi Arabia and Russia producing all they can produce is really, really damaging to American oil markets.
That we are potentially at systemic risk. OPEC has launched a price war, and a price war by definition targets the weaker players and puts them out of business, and shale is pretty weak today. So when you think about what's happening in the sector, we've seen the carnage in the equity market, we've seen it in the high yield market, but there is a ticking nuclear time bomb that's happening in the reserve-based lending market, and that's like the subprime of shale. So this sector, for the better part of 30 years, has been funded by the bank community with very cheap financing, typically 200 to 300 basis points over LIBOR, and that market has mushroomed to about a $200 billion market. Put that in perspective, that's 3 times the size of the high-yield market.
We've asked POTUS to put significant pressure on Saudi to stop this price war. We had 13 senators meet and call the Saudi ambassador last week. Pompeo has called MBS, we know that. The G20 and the G7 have both put significant pressure to stop this price war. If we don't, we're going to be importing 60% of our crude again from the Middle East.
Is going to be huge. It already is, and we are expecting almost 16 million barrels per day of decline across the month of April. That number could easily rise to 20 million barrels per day high.
Today that President Trump is phoning Moscow.
What's the president's leverage?
Well, I think the interesting question is, will the U.S. or will the White House want to give some sweeteners to Moscow in terms of sanctions relief? The U.S. has imposed sanctions on key Russian energy companies such as Rosneft. We've basically sanctioned the Nord Stream 2 pipeline project. And so the question is, will the president give some relief on sanctions to get the Russians to agree to cut production? I think that's a potential path to an early deal.